OpenAI's Dev Day just happened, and as normally as you would expect, people are already killing off loads of startups. And to some point, that's kind of true. There are a lot of game-changing things launched. In some ways, it's not so true. We're going to start by checking out the AgentKit. We'll probably do some other videos on like the other stuff that came out, but really wanted to focus in on this one just because of our proximity, given what we're working on at Prompt Hub and kind of how we see things, and then also how we think about the broader like dev tool space for this type of tooling. So for those that you don't know, they launched AgentKit, which, in their own words, is a set of tools for developers and enterprises to build, deploy, and launch agents. So there are a lot of different things that kind of help you do this. We'll break down the different types that this takes shortly here. Until now, building agents meant juggling tools, orchestration, versioning, evals, prompt testing, so on and so forth. So now you're going to get a builder. You can connect through MCP to their connectors, and then chat kit is just a toolkit for quickly building out like a chat UI, so you don't have to do it yourself. More evaluation stuff. There's a whole UI, which we'll take a look at an example here shortly, where we can map these things out. Ramp did some cool stuff. Other people did cool stuff. There's a connector registry, which doesn't actually go anywhere right now. You can see the URL in the bottom left corner to /agent/connector registry, but if we go here, it doesn't bring us to anywhere. That's specific to the connector registry. Yep, AgentKit lets you embed it. This is an example of seeing it embedded inside of Ramp. A couple other examples we'll click through. Canva's got one. Yeah, you can see all they're all like integrated here. They've had evals since the Agents SDK, but now they have beefed it up. So you can add data sets, trace grading, automatic prompt optimization. I wonder how that works, probably based on failed traces. And this was the big one that really stuck out to me. Third-party model support. Evaluate models from other providers within the OpenAI evals platform. So we're going to check out that too, because I'm interested to see. Because that's the first time we've ever seen like any really mention of any integration of third-party models in any of the OpenAI products. So it's pretty big, and it's actually pretty important for dev tool companies, because I think one constant you could always kind of think of was that it was good for dev tools to be third parties, not from the model companies, because everyone wants to use different models, and the model providers would never allow for integration between those in their tools. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So let's see. Data sets. Yep, classic. We made some changes automatically, adding 2 lines, removing 2 lines. Can't really see why or how. And trace grading. Reinforcement fine tuning. Okay, cool. So let's break this down a little bit. So build, deploy, and optimize agents. And let's go to Excalidraw. Get rid of that. Okay, so OpenAI Dev Day, and we'll be focusing mostly on the, what do they call it? AgentKit? Cool. So there are a lot of ways to build, deploy, and optimize agents, and they kind of operate at different levels. So there are just like SDKs out there, of which OpenAI has one, Anthropic has one, what's the big one? Accrue has one, LangChain has one. These are code, obviously code first implementations of ways you should build agents. Whoops, that's not what we want to do. There are also, of course, there's like the drag and drops. Moving way up the top, we have like drag and drop. So this is higher up on the level of abstractions. We have Zapier, n8n. There's a bunch of stuff in the middle here between full code and drag and drop. Like there's a bunch of like dev tool type companies. You could say even like Prompt Hub was kind of like this, although we never really got into this kind of workflow building because we weren't focused on that. We wanted to build a platform for just generally like working on prompts and discovering prompts. But this is like other people kind of in our world. So this is also like LangChain/Langsmith, where you have like the underlying components in the tool, and you can do even some chaining within that tool. But it's more control to developers than the drag and drop, but still gives like a UI. It tries to kind of fit in between these two, but it doesn't do a really super good job. So another one I would say is Vellum as well. Then there are companies that would probably just say they are like strictly eval companies. So Langsmith might also say they are this, or LangChain. Brain Trust might say they are this. This is definitely actually what brain trust thinks they are. This is what human loop was before it was required. And even within these, there's like always some component of like, you know, the WYSIWYG editors. And yeah, like I said, we never did this because I just thought this was going to happen. And just because OpenAI launched something doesn't mean it's like a completely dead thing to do. But it always just like felt like that would be like a natural next step for them. And so this affects essentially every company that's not listed here. The ones that will get the most attention is n8n and Zapier. But there's actually a lot in here that I think, that will get way more of the brunt here because of the difference of user types. So the dev tools and the eval tools, like these are used by technical folks. So let's move this out of the way. So technical users, and we'll make that brown. While like the drag and drops are used, you know, by non-technical users, generally speaking. So we'll make that green. What OpenAI has here kind of bridges both of these. So then we'll have the AgentKit, because it's both code and platform, of which, you know, these other companies kind of do that too. Actually, then we're going to change this to be red. Cool. So AgentKit kind of does all of this, but these workflows are more built in. They're stickier from what's like already been developed in the past, versus these platforms are much easier to kind of move off of, mostly because a lot of them are newer, and you don't have years and years and years of experience in Zapier and even n8n. It's like much more entrenched to move those workflows over, versus in here, your eval platforms are mostly prompts and traces and like historical data, which is important, but easy to kind of make up. And so it's a lot easier to move out of these boxes. There's less lock-in, versus in here there's actually surprisingly a fair amount of lock-in. And so I think it actually affects these companies more so than the drag and drop editors, but I think it will actually impact them both, and it will impact like these two as well. But it will also impact these because, historically speaking, as someone who was running a company in this space, a big question and something that all of these eval platforms had to consider would be, you know, what if OpenAI comes into my world? So if we say for the eval / dev tool, investors would basically say, as they probably would with any company, what about OpenAI? To which you could give a very credible answer of, OpenAI will launch some sort of tooling, but never for other models. Same goes for Anthropic, Google, etc. And that makes a lot of sense. I think, you know, why would OpenAI add support for that? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, these should just be tools really for their developers. So what's the point of adding support for Claude through these kind of toolings? It doesn't really make sense. It's all built and integrated on like an OpenAI stack. Well, that is until today. So as we saw in the AgentKit, they launched support for third-party model support domain to measure and improve agent performance. So this is like within the evals portion of the platform. Third-party MCPs, of course. But yeah, third-party support, evaluate models from other providers within the OpenAI evals platform. This is huge. This is very important for a certain set of startups, not as important for others. But it means that companies can actually move a lot of their tooling over to OpenAI because they'll have the ability to kind of switch, it seems like, at least run the evals for it, which means it assumes that you can integrate with these other models to actually run the workloads themselves in production. So that's really important. We're going to take a look at that in a second here, but let's look over to the agent builder, see what we're working with. So pretty typical builder here. We'll go back to, so you go to agent builder, and then you can hit create new. There's a bunch of templates, of which this is one. And let's make myself smaller. cool. So you have a start. There's a bunch of different node types. So I'm sure you're very familiar. A lot of companies have built this. And so, I mean, not a great point. The whole thing that they would probably say here is that they've gone a lot deeper and have deeper integrations and like more functionality and things along those lines. But I mean, you can do a lot with the building blocks that I'm seeing here. So there's a start. There's a jailbreak guardrail. This comes out of the box. So they have a bunch of guardrails for moderation, jailbreak, hallucination that just come out of the box. You can set the threshold, what model runs it. And we can see this is basically just the text for prompt injection. Then the agent, so this is a customer support agent. So then there's a classification agent that says classify the user's intent into return, cancel, or get information. So you can imagine this is like a very smart chatbot on like a retail website. Then it's going to route to the correct agent. If you remember, in their agents SDK, they have sub-agents built for like all the different specific agents that should do things, which is like a common pattern to have like these same have different system instructions for the different agents doing different things, so different instructions, but you can pass the same like context history of the conversation, so you can switch between the two of them very easily. So let's see. From here, we're going to get a classification, right? So we kind of know what the output's going to be. Do we do any like formatting of it? I wonder if it's just the output. Yeah, output format. Okay, cool. So output's JSON, then we look at that JSON, and then we give it to an agent that has, this is the system instructions. My guess is you can generate these automatically. Yeah. Retention information, or we can just end. User approval. So this is work for you, approve or reject, and it ends. Okay, cool. You can add a hallucination guardrail on both sides. Let's test this. Say, hi, I need to return my shoes. They don't fit. So it's going through the jailbreak to see if it's a prompt injection. It passed that. Please provide the order number. Okay, yeah, it looks good to me. It's going to ask for it. Ah, not interested. It says, please provide your order number and I'll arrange a replacement pair, but it never asked me for it. That's like a prompt engineering kind of system sort of thing. But then it ends. So that would be like a tweak you would need to make here. But it's a pretty good flow. Let's try and see if we can do... I want to trip the jailbreak guardrail. You can see highlights as it goes through and then it ends. Okay, so that all worked well. And then this is kind of where I think there won't be a lot of time spent on this, but the evaluation that's being built in is actually massive. So I tested this a little bit before the video here. Is this a full one? Yeah, these are all full. Okay, great. So you can see there's a start. It gives us all the full trace. So the trace is basically everything that the model does throughout this run. So it runs the guardrail, it runs a classification agent, it does an if-else, and then it returns that specific agent. And so you'll also see a lot of companies have built this type of tracing into their platforms for like all the observability and like monitoring companies as well, who I guess I should actually add back to this diagram here. They kind of, honestly, these all start to kind of overlap a little bit because they need to be big enough to justify the money that they're raising. So they need to actually eventually try to be something as big as like AgentKit Plus. But so this is also like whatever, like observe startups, of which there's like a few. You can monitor the whole trace, get all the data you need. Oops. So what this allows you to do is essentially once you deploy this, you can really kind of like debug and see how things are running and like run your proper evaluations. And so in here you can run your evaluations of, was the model polite? So this is a grader that will then look, I assume, at the final output. And again, the eval companies like Defense here would say, hey, we go much deeper with what you can eval, like we can run more different types of evals at scale, and like it's probably true. And there will always be a need for like specific tools versus stuff being wrapped into the like whole kind of offering that OpenAI has. Okay, that looks fine. Let's see if we can find where you can integrate those different models. Deploy, can we deploy? This version is already in production. Yeah, okay, you see it does like version tracking too. What's the MCP one look like? Probably just a URL, let's see. What's always interesting is they like barely have any. You assume they'll have more soon. as they let just like other developers build out these things. But like, if you look at like other MCP sites like Smithery or Composia, they have like hundreds and hundreds and like thousands of MCPs that they support. Just do that. No, is there one that doesn't require auth? No. All right, we'll come back to that. I think, here we go. Eval. I don't know. Let's see if we can get to this quick. Can we do this from agents? All right, this might need to be something else then. Can we do this without? No. Okay. Nope. Don't need that. Do one more. I would think we could have logs from responses. No. Okay, whatever. We'll deep dive that later on. But this is just a quick intro to AgentKit because I thought it was really interesting. And I know a lot of people were saying this is actually the death of n8n and Zapier. But I think given like the significant built up knowledge that these tools have within organizations, I actually think they're safer. And I actually think this actually more hurts the newer age AI dev tooling companies. And so we'll see what this ends up shaking out to be. A lot of other cool stuff that we'll be covering in the announcements here, and stay tuned for more.